sustainability, it was really the three pillars of sustainability, or the three E's. It was the environment, social equity, and the economy. And that's really changed. We now have at least 6 or maybe even more sort of themes or facets of sustainability. It's expanded. It now includes a livable built environment, which focuses on aligning land use and transportation, harmony with the natural environment, a resilient economy, interwoven equity, and that's social equity at all levels: housing, transportation, land use, jobs, a healthy community, how walkable and pedestrian friendly our communities are, what neighborhoods have deficiencies with food deserts or availability to quality local foods, and finally responsible regionalism. That when we look at planning for the city's future, that we're not just looking at Asheville through a narrow lens or in a vacuum, that we're also considering other plans that are prepared by Buncombe County or Western North Carolina, and how those plans tie into some of the concepts and some of the policies that we want to incorporate in our own city comprehensive plan. And finally, the comp plan may lead to zoning changes, or what we call in the city of Asheville our Unified Development Ordinance, which contains all of our zoning and subdivision and environmental standards. So as I mentioned, our current comprehensive plan from 2003, there was a focus on redevelopment in areas with, sufficient infrastructure, and a lot of other topics that I think are still, relevant today. That I don't think we need to just throw out all the goals and policies from our 2003 plan because the plan is a little outdated. I think a lot of these themes still resonate today. Infrastructure, mixed-use development, multimodal transportation. If you're not aware, about a week or so ago, the City Council just approved our Asheville in Motion plan, which is a plan that focuses on complete streets and multimodal transportation. And there's a bunch of street sections in that plan that show sort of a before and after type of perspective for what our streets might look like if we move in a more multimodal and complete street type of manner. And affordable housing. I feel like I read probably daily a new that folks expect, and that's going to continue to be a challenge. We'll really try to incorporate all these principles, best practices for sustainability for each of those topics. That, you know, that these are standalone topics, standalone chapters within the comp plan. That's something that
Thank you. So, providing an update on the Central Business District. We all know the importance of the Central Business District, center of commerce, the community, center of the region in Western North Carolina. Actually, we're doing the other one, I'm sorry. Beg your pardon, let's get that other slide up. What do I do here? Escape. Oop, okay, navigate back to that thumb drive. Okay, shucks. Can you help me? Okay, get out of the way. I'm gonna get out of the way. Central Business District. It's about 340 acres of land. We've had a lot of development in the downtown area, and so we undertook a.
This one?
There we go. That's it.
Okay.
Alan, I'm not sure your microphone's picking up the voice.
Oh, my tie is blocking it. Let's try that again. Okay. Really loud. Okay. The downtown area, it's so important for design, for placemaking, for visitors, for the community. So we want to keep it strong, and it needs constant management. And I know members in this group have been involved in downtown many years from a professional standpoint, also on the downtown commission. So your insight and experience is valuable for the city. This is a map not showing skyscrapers, but showing a valuation per acre of the city of Asheville. And the area in the smack dab in the middle is the central business district, and this is sort of a valuation today. You can see the value of downtown and what vertical density brings to the city of Asheville from a tax standpoint. In 2008, we're doing well in the downtown area. This is a kind of a snapshot from 2008, and you'll see growth from that period of time until now. It's increased 37%. What you'll also notice is that we were quiet during the downturn in the economy, and now things are suddenly very busy again. In 2007, though, we were getting a number of proposals in that period of time before that era of growth in downtown. It's like we had passed a milestone. We kind of renovated most of the buildings that could be renovated. Most of the multi-story structures were renovated. And so we were in a new period of growth. It was new construction. So we were seeing projects that we had never really seen the scale of. One of them was the Ellington Hotel, which is right around the corner here behind Doc Chase and that parking lot there. And then this one was Mr. Fraga's project where Cambria Suites is going out. It was a replacement pair of towers. One was a condo tower, one was a hotel tower. Hotel tower was going to fulfill the vision that Grove had for the tower that would have been on top of the Grove Arcade. It was going to try to replicate it. Quite large, a lot of community concern. At the end of the day, it was turned back down by City Council. So the Downtown Commission realized that we really need to update a downtown master plan in order to prepare for growth and understand what we're approving and what's appropriate and how we study that. So the Downtown Commission was instrumental in getting that started for us. This is the downtown review thresholds before we made changes to the downtown standards. This is actually the standard for all review in the city. And so it was all the same for whether you're in downtown or whether you're out in South Asheville or North Asheville. Basically, we have level 1 scale of proposals up to 35,000 square feet. Level 2s are up to 100,000 square feet and 50 or more residential units. And those are reviewed, and they go through Downtown Design Review, that's Downtown Commission, TRC, Planning and Zoning Commission, and then they stop. And then level 3s were anything over 100,000 square feet or over 50 units. So when part of this study was, are the thresholds appropriate? And by the way, we don't have design review for most districts except for the Central Business District, and with the exception of a few historic districts. So 2009, the Downtown Master Plan started. The primary firm was Goody Clancy out of Boston. We had 14 public meetings. We had a number of subcommittees. Maybe you all were involved in some of those meetings. Over 4,000 hours of community time. One of our staff members, Sasha Bertinsky, led that as a consultant and helped walk that through a process. It was all about 4 themes: experiencing downtown, shaping downtown, managing downtown. And a lot of the shaping was a new form or hybrid code for the Central Business District. We did a complete rewrite. Had a lot of help from the architecture community in sort of formulating that and giving feedback. And we reviewed, we provided a new development review threshold. So this is the current threshold we use today. We did 2 things. We expanded the level 2 standards. We took it down and we pushed it up so that more things fall into a level 2 threshold now. So whereas in the rest of the city, level 2 is 36,000 square feet. In the downtown area, it's 20,000 and smaller. It's 20,000 and up. But it goes up to 175,000 square feet. So it's quite a large range there. We also, for the first time in the master plan, we established heights in downtown. And before it was unlimited height. So how do you evaluate if something's too tall or appropriate when there's no height cap? So now we have 2 height standards. We have 145 feet for areas surrounding the downtown core. For the downtown core area primarily. And then outside the edges, west side, over towards the tunnel, south slope, you can get to 265 feet. 265 feet was the height that was approved for the Ellington Hotel project. So the review process is quite similar in its formatting, but the developer must hold a community meeting. It goes to TRC first, technical review, to make sure it's buildable, and then it goes to the Downtown Commission. And there's a design review component still in the Downtown Commission. They recommend, and finally, Planning and Zoning Commission provides the final review. So it's quite a large project, ending with the Planning and Zoning Commission, which is a city council appointed commission of peers. The very large projects are over 175,000 square feet or 145 feet tall, greater than 145 feet tall. And that would follow the same process, except city council has to review those. And we provided a diagram in the guidelines, and it shows sort of how this is graphically portrayed. This sort of ties in with design requirements. Buildings under 75 feet, as you get taller, the buildings have to shrink down. The tower portion has to be a percentage of the size of the footprint of the lot. So if you remember, the best example probably is the Cambria Suites Hotel, which is now across from Grove Arcade under construction. There's a base, a 4-story podium. On top of that would be a tower that represents 50% of the lot area. So that's kind of the standard now. When you're above 75 feet, the tower has to shrink down, so we maintain, we don't have such a big scale in the sky, if you will. It's more like punctuation, you get light air, passes through a sort of a balancing thing. And then, so this is also showing the review thresholds, level 1 and 2, below 145, above, if it happened to be taller, it would go to level 3, and then also scale. So we try to do more graphics in this plan. And then when you have those very large projects, there's 2 review methods. And in the traditional downtown core, those are reviewed as conditional zonings. And when you're outside the traditional core, and this traditional downtown core correlates to the National Register Historic District. So it's tied to a map that was created through historic preservation with that kind of effort, but it follows that pretty closely. When you're in the core and you have a large project level 3, it's conditional zoning. You can, if you've done that process, it's a rezoning, and it's getting to that extra scale. And that's what you're asking council for approval, is an agreement between your site plan and development and as a trade-off. So council agrees to it through a site plan approval process. And they can have other things too. The most recent one we just did was the BB&T redevelopment. It was of a scale, bringing new uses that weren't on the site before, and it triggered a level 3 review. Even though it's an existing building, it was a level 3 review because of new uses coming in. That did get approved. And then when you're outside the traditional core, those very large projects are reviewed the old way, like other level 3 projects are in the city. It's a conditional use permit. You can't communicate with council. Council can't hear about your project officially until you present evidence at the council hearing. So it's a quasi-judicial process. Council is acting as the judge and approves or not, and they may ask for mitigating conditions to make your project meet the 7 conditional use standards. So it's a different type of process. They're both useful in their own way. A lot of people prefer the conditional zoning process because they can have an early conversation with council. So that's kind of where we're at. Since 2010, this is our, we kind of stopped at 2015. We don't have 16 in here, but we do have the development trends on what was approved through the process. We had 9 residential projects throughout the downtown area. We had 5 hotel proposals approved. We had 1 mixed hotel, that was the BB&T, mixed residential and hotel. An office use, 3 institutional uses, which really were Buncombe County. 2 for the life safety tower, elements in the courts facility, and then the one over here on Cox Avenue, the new Health and Human Services facility going in with the parking structure. And so one thing I've noticed, the hotel rooms totaled about 700 new rooms in the downtown area. But interestingly enough, with the number of residential projects, usually much smaller, about the same number, about 700 rooms, apartments being proposed. And this is sort of a map of where they're happening. We're getting a lot of interest in the South Slope. We're getting some interest on the west side of town, the west side of downtown, and then luckily TK Trips replaced, and now we have 2 projects there. And then so there's other hotels right in the vicinity here. Eagle Market, the Foundry Hotel is going to take the old, I think it's called Boozer's Automotive or Boozer's Radio or something like that. Some other facilities in there, and then another one where the Jones Taxi Stand is a residential project happening there. So we're seeing some underbuilt property or just surface lots being replaced with new proposals. All these have been approved, by the way. And then you'll drive around town, you'll see that some of them are under construction. So in the fall, we had an election. And there was some community concern about the rate of growth and development in the downtown area. And so a lot of community members, through their voting, expressed that concern, and it translated to council directing staff to review these things. What's the threshold levels? If we've got it right, did we go too far with the downtown master plan changes? Also, how those level 3 projects should be reviewed. Should they, the council members prefer the conditional zoning process, but it's only right now mapped for the traditional downtown core. Could it be expanded to do other things in the rest of this downtown area? Make it all conditional zoning instead of the conditional use permit process. And then a lot of questions about hotels. We had the 5 projects approved, since about 6 projects, 2010 to last year. And do we need to do anything different with hotels? Is the review process for them, should it be the same as every other use? What are the public's concerns? Because the public shared a lot of concerns with the council. And then should they be evaluated in some other way? So when just the most recent example with BB&T, when Mr. McKibben brought that proposal forward, someone provided a new moniker or new naming. They said he provided the McKibben standard for a new hotel, meaning that he brought money to affordable housing. He guaranteed kind of a living wage for his full-time staff, and he was going to lease his spaces, his retail or commercial spaces to local businesses. So it's those things that are outside of the zoning power, but he agreed to them through his conditional zoning review and approval. So some people wonder, should we be doing anything differently? We had a developers forum in March. We had it at the Lord Auditorium. Had a great turnout. Some of you were probably there. We had a really big crowd. We try to ask these questions and get feedback on these topics. A lot of community comments about it. When we kind of tallied up the written entries, most people were, about these topics, most people felt like you could shift the levels down and instead of having up to 175 being the level 2, bring it down to some number. There was about half the folks who responded said that, but about the other 2/3 said, don't touch it, leave it alone, it's working. The process for the level 3 projects, the very large ones, should they be conditional zonings or conditional use permits? It's almost like we don't really care, or it's just not, we're not focused on that, or it's kind of hard to understand the difference, so not a lot of comment on it so far. And then the hotel issue, there were a few folks who expressed concerns about the hotels, how they should be reviewed, expressed some comment about what we do next, but most people felt like it's working, stay out of it. Just leave it like the rest of any other use. Someone kind of joked and said, well, someday if there's too many hotel rooms, they'll turn into affordable senior housing someday, just like we have in downtown. So what council, we provided the feedback to council. Council's asked us to do a little more community outreach. And that outreach is going to represent open city hall, or basically asking questions. Interestingly enough, a lot of people were interested in this process again. So the developer holds a meeting. I'm going to say the first thing on the list here. Developer holds a public meeting. There was surprisingly a lot of interest in doing more with that. How's the public notified? How do they hear about this meeting? So basically, it's like if you're adjacent, so adjacents get a letter, and that's probably about the extent of it, and the adjacents are the 200-foot adjacent property owners. If you're a tenant, if you lease, you're not getting a letter, it's going to your landlord. And then we don't post the site with a Z sign. So it's not officially our meeting, it's the developer's meeting. But there may be some things we can work out and change. We might be able to put things on our website on a regular basis. These meetings are coming up. If you're interested in downtown development, this is a concern for you, check it back regularly. Maybe there's something to learn or see. So we're taking feedback on that too. And that was a bit of a surprise that people felt like we should be doing more. And what I'll say in general with all of our notification that we do for all of our hearings, we exceed state standards in every way, just about. The state requires that you notify for rezonings, or conditional use permits, or amendments to your wording amendment, your code. That's about it. We do it for most of our projects. We do some kind of notification. So that's about all that. I can, we'll answer questions, I guess, all together here. But this downtown one was interesting and it's ongoing. So we would love to have your input on Open City Hall. We'll probably get that up next week or two and leave it up for about a month and just see if there's something we're missing. Any other feedback about thresholds, process, and all that. I may need to dig up this other RAD. We have a little update on the RAD plan. Let me see if I can find that on here. I'm looking for my architect friend here who knows everything about this computer. Thank you. This is the one we had up. Okay. And Todd, do you want to provide an update, or you could try to do this? Okay, so everyone knows the River Arts District. It's been growing. We've been working on this area for a very long time. It was all zoned. It's all zoned river now for the most part, or commercial, industrial, CI, and we are. And then the arts community has really grown down here. River Arts District is, they have a business association. They have an artist association. There's a lot of activity down there. There's ton of studios. It was time to study it in more detail and see if a form code or some kind of rezoning would help to imagine the growth down there that we expect, but also preserve what we appreciate about the River Arts District. And I think part of that was with New Belgium arriving and building, and property values are going up down there big time. So there's a worry that the smaller properties will be consolidated, maybe removed, and larger things will come in there. So it could happen, and so we just want to be ready for it and give it some thought. So this process started last fall. We had a public review of the draft starting in March 7th. And the draft today says that there's about 8 or 10 districts there, and they're sort of focusing on scale. So a lot of it's basically a mixed-use district. We expect it to be, but we want form or architectural elements so that buildings kind of relate to their property. They fill in the site, and they fit in with the context of that area down there. Everything on the west side of the railroad tracks, which is sort of that big white line through the middle, is going to go underwater. So the challenge has been, how do you create a place? How do you make a pedestrian-oriented place, walkability, when the building's going to be 9 feet up? And how does the pedestrian experience that? We're doing a terrific transportation improvement program down there with new street and greenways and complete streets, 5 ways. It's going to be fantastic. And we're going to go right by some key properties that someday might redevelop. But the building's going to go up, so we need to relate to that space up here. So how does that happen? So part of this is the form. We're trying to figure that out. And you might imagine in Biltmore Village, where we have the nice shops there on it's Depot Street right there. I'm sorry, not Depot Street, 21st Street. Thank you. They have to be elevated. They're not quite as high as this area will be. But they do elevate up. So they have grand stairs. They have a very large porch out front. It's working. But when you add 5 more feet or 7 more feet, will it be different? How do we protect that? So that's part of the form, as part of the conversation. We also have a lot of our industrial properties there, and we're trying to decide, do we just need to leave it wide open and let the market take care of it, or do we need to protect and save some industrial land? Were we just lucky with New Belgium and we got a really great industrial user, and it'll be a one-off, never happen again, or do we hold that property back and just see if there's something like that will come. You know, New Belgium's little sister or something comes down, or you get a great project. So it's sort of the debate still on for that. It goes north of the bridge, the Jeff Bowen Bridge, and in that area, that character kind of changes up there. So it's been really interesting. You might imagine we've had a lot of meetings with property owners, with all those interest groups down there, business association artists, and trying to work this out. But just so you know, a form code has elements that are common to it. There are things that apply to all properties, and they're in the front of the documents, so they're worth reading. And then there's like each specific district has its own standards, and they're really written to address the specifics of that neighborhood, street, or block, or whatever. They're unique in some way, so it might be scale or setback or other issues. So the architects who have worked with our other form code, which is Haywood Road, overall they tell me that it reads really well. They appreciate it. It's easy to follow. They don't always agree with what's in there, but at least you can tell what we're asking for. We focus on the lot. Placement of buildings, coverage on the lot frontage. What happens there, and height and massing. So, you know, the public space is as important as the building itself, and so there's details for all that. It's hard to read here, but you can get a look at that. It's online, actually. We're getting comments on that still. And then all these form codes follow up with a use table. Even though it's a form code and we focus on form, there's still uses. So we try to consolidate them in a simpler fashion and sort of, you know, we don't spell out candle maker, brass polisher, or you know, I don't know. It's kind of gets consolidated into retail or shop or something. You know, it's not so spelled out as old zoning codes used to be. It's meant to consolidate that. So you have use table, and then there's parking standards. So one thing that this is the table represented on the right. We don't have a parking standard in downtown. So we've gone all these years. You can build anything in downtown. You don't have to park it off street. No requirements for that. And it's worked pretty well, but we're kind of reaching a point where maybe we're studying the issue again. We're concerned about it a little bit. We're at that tipping point maybe of just we need more parking. Maybe you have to build it on our site. The River Arts has always had parking requirements. It's been quite reduced. And the success of that district means that there's just a real shortage of parking, and there's not a lot of great sites to do a lot of surface parking because there's not that many empty parcels. So we're kind of struggling with that. And so that's being discussed now. I think there's probably the parking's going to actually be, more parking will be required in the River District after this is approved. So that's of interest. And then the timeline, this is sort of, the draft code was released after a number of meetings in the fall. We got feedback. We had a public meeting at the Grant Center, Southside, and we're in our revisions to the draft code. The first draft, we'll get a second draft released late summer, and we'll have another round of community meetings and comments. So you're welcome to give feedback on that. And then we hope that we'll start an approval process in the fall, not rushing it, taking our time, making sure that people, their concerns are addressed, property owners' concerns are addressed, that sort of thing. So those are the kind of like what we wanted to share today. And I know between Todd and myself, we will try to answer any of your questions if you have any. And Mary said that you have to be here for 15 minutes. Is that right, Mary? Yeah. Okay, so we're probably well on our way. So who's got our first question? Aaron.
This is more of a comment, but I found that TRC map that you have online that shows all the projects that have been, I don't know if they're all the ones that have been approved or just submitted or what, but I found it very helpful just from an information standpoint.
Great.
See everything graphically where it goes.
Right, so on the Development Services Center portion of the website, we've got a TRC submittal list. So it's not necessarily everything approved yet or the final set of plans, it's the initial submittal. So it is helpful. Good. Sometimes I have to look in there myself to see what's, you know, remember a project or something. Yes, sir.
In terms of planning, specifically within Central Business District, I saw a lot of talk about the public spaces, the sidewalks, the streetscape, all developments, the structures, and so forth. What is in the works in terms of public parks, green spaces? I feel like the city of Asheville needs more than that. I realize live in a great outdoor area, but the fact is,
Yeah.
this is a district that benefits from more open park space.
Well, a couple things are going on. One is we are studying the Haywood Street property near the U.S. Cellular Center. The city bought that originally for a mixed use and parking structure up there. You know all the story, the backstory on that. We are working with the Asheville Design Center to do a public visiting process for that. We won't end up with a site plan. It will not be a site plan, but it will kind of narrow down uses and sort of take us further. And then it'll be a discussion with council at the end of the day on that property. We recognize what you're saying too about managing the other spaces too, and maybe other park spaces. Maybe the South Slope's going to need green space or a parklet or a plaza down that way because of all the growth. We hope to do an amendment or an update to the downtown master plan, and we hope that it would help us with management issues. Sometimes we're loving our sidewalks to death. There's so many people visiting that there's just no room to even pass through. People are in the street, listen to a busker or whatever. All that needs to be managed. And that's the downtown master plan. We didn't have the same problem, did we, John Rogers, back at that time? So it's really jumped the fence on that issue, and so we need to address it. So that's part of that ongoing downtown management that we need.
I just a couple of comments. First, the business of council's approval of projects. The process, which is somewhat judicial, where council doesn't hear supposedly about the project until it's presented to them, is the ultimate insanity.
The conditional use permit process.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, the council should know about projects that have been approved, should take part in the back and forth as part of the downtown commission review of the developer's public exposure to the project, all that. The more they know about a project, the more sane the decision they make can be. And it's absolutely sensible to have a requirement that shields them from the evolution of the projects.
Right.
In terms of hotels, it seems to me that the issue is mostly what happens at the street level with the hotel building. Asheville has suffered, and as long as I've known it, which is since '71, as a snaggletooth community. It all started with banks. First Union and Bank of America and Wachovia took out 3 huge chunks of the commercial area downtown. It stymied the vitality of the town. The development of mall followed that, of course, which was the coup de grace. But the back and forth we had with the Aloft Hotel, for instance, it moved their bar up to the 2nd floor, which turned out to be a great thing for them and the public, was intended to allow the street level to have commercial retailing uses, and it does have about half that frontage that way. But it seems to me it's not an issue of a hotel or not a hotel. It's an issue of what happens to the street that the hotel is on, as well, of course, as the impact on commerce. But I mean, my basic thought about hotels is the more you can have, the better. A resident buys one basket of lifetime. A hotel room provides a basket of fire every day. A new one. And then I had one other comment. The Riverfront River Arts District is an enigma to me. Good luck to anybody who can figure that puzzle out. The problem of floods, the problem of the vitality of the region has to do with low rent structure, which doesn't encourage development. So, rent control, maybe that's a good zone.
Thank you.
Anyway.
Thank you.
Alan, we got a hand up over here. Oh, if you still got a question. I'll segue off of John's remarks, sister. Now I know this is sort of an ongoing piece, input. But to John's point about the parking down there, there's certain regions, the river artery is very long, and it has a different amount of densities, either existing or proposed for development. But there is certain central cores, which would be Robert Street, Clingman, and Haywood, that almost live like a CBD. And we advertise it, the community advertises let's go to the River Arts District and let's stroll around with different artists, let's drink beer, and let's eat, and take a class, world class, or whatever. So it is important, and it needs to be recognized that there are certain parts that do live a little bit more like a CBD when we talk about the parking count. And we are looking at ways, different developers are looking at ways to provide affordable arts studios and possibly live-work situations where you can live above your studio, or the reverse, so that you can combine these. It's almost like being at home, but instead of being out here, you are down in the red. And if we have intense parking requirements, then that's going to be jeopardized, because that's going to take more property, more structured parking, and you're going to chase those affordable rents out. And so we do need to be very mindful of that. There are projects ongoing that are looking to have those uses in there, because we can't. John is exactly right. It's a puzzle, and we just have to be mindful of that. And I think in our CBD here, we've got a lot of density, and people find a way to park, or hopefully there will be structured parking that will come to the RAD at some point, private or public-private. But that needs to be said. I think John said it well. Thank you.
Bill, yeah.
My question is just curiosity. What is going to happen to Bank of America?
Off of Pritchard Park, that one.
What's that?
At Pritchard Park.
Yeah.
I haven't seen anything on that yet.
Hotel.
You think a hotel? Well, I haven't seen it yet, but we'll stay tuned. Anyone else have questions?
I just ask that you keep Mary and AIA actually informed with the timeline you've got on the screen here, make sure that we have the information that we can send out reminders about those dates.
Yeah, I think we really could use that help on the open city hall for the downtown threshold and that continued discussions that we have. Sir.
I guess the 4B highway plan now being approved, and the planning for that would certainly, that particular scheme of potential for paramount property to be put back into the public arena and something or owned by the DOT.
Right.
The city looking at any kind of planning for what would happen in that land that might be.
I think the agency's done the most study on that so far. Now that we have a plan selected, or a proposal selected, I think we'll have plenty of work to do to try to keep up with that. But right now, we have not done a study of like what will happen with that land and who, what zoning, what's appropriate, that sort of thing. Some of it's on the Montford side, perhaps, and some of it's in the downtown side.
Just add to that too, that there is a sort of a city task force with various staff members from departments, planning, transportation involved, as well as Councilwoman Julie Mayfield and others involved in this task force that are kind of regularly meeting with representatives from the DOT. So even though there's this sort of preferred alternative that's been selected, there's still, I think, opportunities to kind of influence some of the specifics about some of the impacts to the neighborhoods and kind of reconnecting some of the neighborhoods and providing better access to some of the isolated neighborhoods. So I think it's kind of going to be an ongoing discussion with some additional tweaks to that preferred or accepted alternative for the alternative.
Sir.
Can I ask an affordable housing question?
Yes.
I've heard a lot about ways to make affordability. A lot of people talk about density and more units per acre. But when you have more units per acre, it makes the land more expensive or more valuable. which keeps the value the same, but allows you to put more units in there if they're smaller and therefore more affordable. And I wonder if anybody has looked at that.
I don't think we're at that point yet where people aren't maximizing what's their potential of the land or the zoning allows yet. So in the downtown area, I reviewed several residential projects. We have no, so one thing I didn't point out on that, the table with in the old days, it was 50 units and above, it was a level 3 project. We removed any threshold for residents to take it out as a factor that might, someone stays below 49 units or something, so they don't have to go to council. But even since the master plan was approved and we've had CBD, South Slope, the projects are really, it's the building code that's sort of defining, it's the methodologies for construction that are limiting the volume, scale, whatever. So
I didn't need necessarily
the CBD. Yeah, that could be something we look at. We are working on in the department. We're calling it barriers to infill housing. So if you've done residential work in the city, for the most part, the biggest zoning category is the R8s, RSA, RMA probably. And what that requires is a 5,000 square foot lot size. And you have to have 50 feet of frontage on the street. So you create new lots, that's your standard. If you're in steep slope, it's a whole other discussion. But what we're wondering is if, could we live with smaller lots or lot widths? So we have many properties that maybe have 80 feet of frontage and 9,000 square feet. According to the rules, you can't subdivide that. That's a big, nice, single-family home lot. But if the rules were slightly different, or you had some little different parameters, you might got to get more units in there. We've thought about that. Like, how do you balance out? People talk about tiny homes. I think I don't know how much interest there really is to buy and live in a 250 square foot home, but there's a lot of talk about it. Well, the lot size is still 5,000 square feet. You have a really tiny home. Is there any benefit to having a floor area ratio or other thing that kind of you can match the lot? You can have a smaller lot if you'll do a smaller home. So we're trying to study these different options and haven't come to any conclusions yet, except that we're hoping to have in June a meeting to discuss a community kind of discussion. Please come, and I'll share with Mary about the multifamily standards for creating multifamily units, duplexes, tris, quads, whatever, and then this lot size discussion. The other thing about multifamily is there's no incentive to do it. You all see this, you drive around the city, everywhere is single family homes, and if you have a lot of space where you can subdivide, you're going to build a single family house on it, you're going to sell it, you have no problem getting financing or a buyer. So the other products, these other longer term multifamily type things, those are very large scale projects. We're not seeing that smaller scale. Part of it's building code. There's challenges with the building code. You have to follow that all the commercial code after 2 units. So that has its own challenges and extra costs. But we also don't want the zoning to stand in the way of that. So the way the code works today, imagine the R8s again. The first unit requires 5,000 square feet. I want to do a duplex. I don't get a break. I have to do 10,000. I have a lot size of 10,000 square feet and multifamily zone for the most part. So I'd rather, if I can get that close to it, two lots, I'll do 2 lots and sell them, and I'm done, right? The developer's done. So we're trying to balance it out. Maybe the original code that Asheville had back in 1948, every residential lot, you could put 2 units on it from the start. And then if you were going to build a 3rd unit or a 4th unit, each additional unit required 500 square feet additional lot area. So that's how Montford, over the years you have these areas of town where there's a 6-plex, an 8-plex. The lots are a little larger. They're not 8 times 5,000 square feet. They're a small fraction over the minimum number. So we're trying to study that. Can we get back to some reasonable number? And floor area ratio could be something that fits in with that as we go through this exercise and determine. We don't want to affect in a negative way community character. Asheville's all about their neighborhoods and neighborhood community character. We want to manage that. But there could be more ways to add additional units that won't affect quality of life or the feel of our neighborhoods. So, not on the topic today, but
one quick bit of that, Alan, is townhome designation allows you to stay within the residential code.
right.
So that's the zoning code. So that's starting to see the townhome designation.
Right. The townhome still says It's 5,000 to justify each unit, say it's RA, 5,000 to justify each townhouse unit. There's nothing in the code that offers a break for those townhouse units, so that's another one that kind of fits in with that. So we had a grown-up conversation about growth in the city.
I think it's worth mentioning that next year, in North Carolina is going to host a design competition based here in Asheville to tackle this very issue. Duplex, triplex, fourplex, infill, and housing to address what's currently missing middle. So it's not larger scale. This is a program that's moving around the state. Next year, we're going to host it in Asheville.
Right.
That's going to be a program. It's tackling workforce housing and multi-family housing in the city. So stay tuned.
Thank you.
Does the cost development,
Go ahead, you're good.
cost development angle get you breaking it?
It does. It's the cottage development. It's in the multifamily districts only, so you can't do it in any RS district. It's got to be the RM districts, and it does give you a break. So but there's a big distance between each one of those cottage developments. It's like 1,500 feet apart, measured on the map. So if you do the first one in and you make your concentric 1,500 foot radii circle, no one else in that zone can do one after you. So you're kind of taking. So we're trying to study, is that a reasonable tool? It could be the tiny house model, and it could, and they're already scaled to be smaller anyway, and there's a lot of single family home style to it. Maybe there's a way to flex that out and allow threes, almost four area ratio style, with a lot, the size of the lot, maybe it turns how many units and covers that sort of thing. So we want to study that one. It won't be part of this initial discussion, but we hope to keep it on the list in the next year. Do you have it behind you, Bill? Sorry.
Yeah, just want to clarify on the town homes, they are separate lots, so you could have a town homes for building, that's how it's determined. So otherwise, it would be a condo, even if it looks like. I just want to clarify that. And also, is there a separate timeline for amending the uniform development ordinance, or is that totally separate?
We would complete the comprehensive plan first, and then it should direct us into areas where we can make changes to the UDO, rewrite, just amend, or however we have to amend. The old code was adopted in 1997. It's like adopted the week I started working with the city, basically. And a lot of you probably were involved in that process, but it took like years, maybe 5 years to create that unified development. So hopefully, now that we kind of have something to work with, it won't take us 5 years to kind of make changes in response to the content.
And just add to that too, we are working on other current UDO amendments. Just because we have a comprehensive plan currently right now, that might lead to some, could lead to some bigger changes potentially in UDO. That's what kind of comes out of the comp plan process. But in terms of you built barriers to infill housing and some of the analysis research we're doing as part of that effort, that could lead to some tweaks to the UDO. In the meantime, we're concurrent with the comp plan. Now, we don't necessarily have to wait for the comprehensive plan to be completed to move forward with other UDO amendments. We feel that that's necessary to achieve these city goals.
Bill?
Is there anything in the code that's being worked on to encourage single wide, double wide mobile home parks to be upgraded into pocket neighborhood, modular clusters, or other higher grade uses? Is there anything that's zoning that's going to get handled?
We, in the city, actually, we don't have that many areas where we have a mobile home overlay, manufactured housing overlay, or a single unit overlay for manufactured housing. We don't have many areas for that. We have wondered if, since the tiny home, sometimes the ones on the wheels are closest to a manufactured house, maybe there's some way to swap out, but I don't know how that will work. We haven't spent a lot of time on it. Most of those areas are really in the county that have mobile parks and other things. So we have a few vestiges of it in the city, but not too much. Who else has a question? Anyone? Brian, anything? No? Nothing to add? Well, thank you all very much. I don't know if there's anything I Some questions or if we plenty of time for your credit? You guys are good? All right.
Hey, Alex, pleasure to meet you. As you know, we've seen you around, but yeah, and we call on the phone. But yeah, I'm on the committee for. Yeah. Right. Absolutely, yeah. I forgot about that actually. Yeah, I've only attended the one meeting, but yeah, it's exciting. We got some work to do. It's good stuff. We have absolutely, yeah. See you, Alex.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm gonna say that's great. Thank you very much. It's great seeing I want to coordinate this design competition.
Nice job.
Nice to see
I'll
you.
give you a call.
Okay.
I like that. Let's get lunch.
Let's have lunch or something. That'd be awesome.
Have a nice one.
Yeah, she's so good. And I've read it. She's really stuck it out.
So,
Yeah. Good to see you.
Yeah, I want to coordinate this design, statewide design. Actually, never actually. Yeah, North Carolina hosts an annual housing design competition this year in Charlotte.
I love that. It's great.
But the idea is that you get 75 to 100
How you doing? Good to see you. Yeah. And the townhouse has, the more I learn about it, the more it goes. We have some next year.
I'll drop you an email.
Yeah. Okay. I know your name is really clear to you. Now I push it along.